celebrating our Irish heritage, and if you're not Irish, it's okay too, we can still celebrate. And I like to tie it into my background with chocolate, celebrating some of the Irish pioneers in the chocolate industry. And we're going to be pairing different chocolates together. First, we have some Irish bread today, so we're going to be celebrating with that and using that sort of as our water cracker of sorts. So if you were to sample certain things when you're doing a cheese pairing or a wine pairing, you might use a plain water cracker to cleanse your palate. So this is similar, there's not too much sugar in it, so we're going to use that as our water cracker, our Irish water cracker. And then we have Barry's Irish tea today. It's regular caffeinated, just FYI. Some people ask me that. And that's a really nice blend of teas. There are three or four very well-known teas in Ireland. So Barry's would be one, Bewley's is another, Lyons, and someone actually mentioned a Thompson's tea that I haven't ever had before. But Barry's is a very strong tea that uses mostly tea leaves from India, the Assam region of India. So if you look at the tea when you get it, it's got that nice red malty look to it. So that's what they use. And they also use Kenyan tea leaves too. So that's a nice balance between the two. So you'll see what you think. I just poured it, so I'm letting it cool a little bit because the carafes keep it pretty hot. And then after we have our Irish bread, we'll start working our way up and having our palate sort of get used to the different flavors. The next will be a bark I make in the winter and sometimes in the spring, but I include pumpkin seed, natural coconut, not sulfated coconut, Celtic sea salt, and some dried cranberry in that. And that is 53% cacao. So that's mid-range chocolate. And 53% is a semi-sweet chocolate, but it's not considered in the bittersweet range. So if we have 54%, then the remainder would be 46% sugar present in there. So that's sort of mid-range. And they consider the healthiest chocolate to be 70% and up. If you've read articles, 70% and up is the most healthy. And so after we try the bark, so we've got some viscosity from the pumpkin seed, it's a little oily, and the natural oils from the coconut. That sometimes people feel tastes more bitter, not and a darker flavor than the next step up, which would be the 73% cacao. And this is a Guittard chocolate. I mostly use Guittard chocolate, which is Belgian chocolate. And this has our emblems of shamrocks and the claddagh on there. And they're sort of highlighted with really nice edible baking dust. So it's sort of like a little work of art. I think that's basically why I got into it. I really enjoy finding very beautiful engraved molds and then sort of creating little works of art. So this is also a tempered product. And so when you taste that, you'll taste the snap. So it's tempered means shelf stable. So you'll taste that it'll melt on your tongue, which is the proper way to eat chocolate. You don't want to chomp through it because you won't get the cocoa flavor and the vanilla notes and the caramel notes. So you'll let it melt a little bit on your tongue, and some people even coat the roof of their mouth. So you're really coating your whole palate. So that is the 73%. And then at the end, we'll try the 86% cacao, which is the most bitter of all. And that is, well, they actually have 90% as well. And I actually saw it in the candy aisle the other day, 100% cacao in the candy aisle, not the baking aisle. So that's pretty amazing. That's no sugar present at all. So we'll try that, but we're gonna do a little bit of a different pairing. I don't know if you've ever tried chocolate and cheese together, but it's an interesting pairing, especially with a darker bittersweet chocolate and an aged Killarney cheddar. So when you have an aged cheddar, and I'm sure you've had aged cheddar before, the water sort of wicks out of the cheese a little bit so that the oils or the viscosity is intensified, so it's creamier on your tongue. And also, when it ages, the sugar in the cheese intensifies. So we'll see what you think. It's different on everyone's palate, but sometimes you'll have the nice pairing of the sugar in the aged cheese, and that sort of makes up for the lack of sugar in the darker chocolate. So it's an interesting pairing with that. So first we're going to get started with the tea. I want to make sure I have enough cord. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. And while you're waiting for me to pass around the tea, I'm going to let you take a piece of this Irish bread. Okay, I'll give you guys this. Okay, so with the Irish soda bread, a lot of people believe that soda bread's been around for 500 years in Ireland. But actually, the Irish didn't get bicarbonate of soda brought over to Ireland until the 1840s. So they were actually making a flat white bread. And then in the north, if you've been to Ireland, many times you get the brown bread, the dark bread. It's very dry, very, very dry sometimes. And in the north, they'll call it a soda farl or a wheaten bread. So they use more of the wheat in the north, and sometimes they even flatten it, so it's more of a dense flavor. Whereas in the south, they'll make it like this, similar, and sometimes even less sugar, and they put the cross in the top of the bread to ward off evil in the home. So it's sort of based in that. Okay, so we'll pair that with a little bit of tea. So with this tea, there is a tiny bit of stevia that I put in just so it's not bitter for everyone. That's hot. I don't know if he... Okay. There you go. So you could look at it and see it's got that malty red look to it. That's a nice deep Dublin tea.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I love it. So someone asked, is it the red or the green? Do you drink the red?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
So the red is a different flavored tea. It's a little bit of a stronger tea. And then there's black, which I didn't even know. Did you know that? There's a black box tea for berries. I just had someone come to a program who was in Ireland. I've never even seen it in this country. And that's even stronger. And so this is basically brewed normally, but if you'd brewed it any stronger, there's a saying which I love, the Irish will say, it's brewed strong enough for a mouse to trot upon it, which I thought is pretty great. But this isn't that. So we have plenty of this tea if you'd like refills. Okay, so for the people that have been to the program before, bear with me as I just quickly go over a little bit about the history of chocolate. I just like to tell a little bit about it, so I'll quickly go through it. So this is how chocolate is harvested. It's an $83 billion industry, so amazingly enough, most of the chocolate is hand harvested in the world, and the trees grow in very tender soil, so they can't bring machinery in. So a lot of these families live on the cacao plantations, and that's their livelihood. I don't know if you've heard that they feel that the cacao tree and the plantings are in danger with climate control, and that they're really worried about the supply of cacao in the upcoming years. So that's very concerning. So here's a picture of the tree. And the pods grow directly on the bark of the tree. And if you know what like a Nerf football looks like, that's about the size of it. And I always bring this to show, this is a little bit of a sample that I made to show you what it would look like, the size of it, and what it would look like if it was cut in half, which is what they do. And there's a picture down here. Once they take the machete, take the pod off the tree, then you have this pod with all the seeds inside. But it would sort of be encased in a pulp, which is like a citrusy pulp. And then they have to get that out, get the pulp out and drain it out. Then take all the seeds out of these pods, spread it on tarps in the rainforest, turn them for like a week to let the seeds ferment. And then they have to grind them and winnow them, clean them, and roast them. So that's a huge process, considering, you know, the demand in the world. But then afterward, I'm sure you've seen these before. These are cacao nibs. So cacao nibs are a superfood, and they are one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. David Wolfe is a nutritionist, and he wrote books about how healthy the cacao nib is, or the cacao bean. So basically, that's what this is, the bean crushed into little nibs. So if we decide that we like these nibs, and you can try these later, that would be the last thing you would try today, okay? After the bitter chocolate, this is even more bitter because there's no sugar present at all. After they have these nibs processed, this is the point where they decide if they're gonna make cocoa or not, and chocolate. So if they wanna make cocoa powder, they add alkaline salts to the process. If they wanna make chocolate, they grind these nibs into a paste, and that's the basis for making chocolate. And amazingly enough, the fact that I find amazing is 10 of these, so there are about 60 beans in here, so 10 pods, 600 beans approximately, makes only 1 pound of processed chocolate, which is really nothing. A pound is nothing. So that just puts it in perspective for you how much work goes into chocolate production. So we're going to enjoy it even more when we taste it today. Yes?
What part of the world grows? Is it Africa that grows?
Ivory Coast exports the most.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, and then there's Ecuador, Brazil, Costa Rica. So the plantations are anywhere where there is a tropical rainforest type conditions. And there was even an experimental one in Hawaii as well. On the Dole plantation, they're working with that to see if that will take root. So that's just a little bit about chocolate production. And then as people explored with the Olmec Indians, sort of shared the information with the Aztecs, and the Aztecs shared with the Spaniards. This is a Spanish drawing that they brought back to Spain. And then the Spanish shared with others, and then soon enough, it started making its way around Europe. And that's how it got to Ireland. And there was a man, John Hannon, an Irishman, who was working in a chocolate production factory and knew the ways of how to make cake chocolate, which is different than what we have now today. Ours is a very creamy base. We're used to that something melts on our tongue. It's very creamy. But back then, if you've had that cake chocolate that's very gritty, that's similar to what they had back then. They would make it into a cake, and then you'd scrape it into some hot liquid, and you'd have drinking chocolate. So John Hannon came over to Dorchester, Massachusetts. He had family here, but he was impoverished, and he heard that there was a man in Dorchester that had a lot of money that wanted to start the first North American chocolate mill. So that man was Dr. James Baker at Baker's Chocolate. And they built this huge factory in Dorchester, which remained for many, many years. And it probably employed the whole town. It was such a big factory. And so John Hannon was the one to teach everyone how to produce the chocolates, and he was the one to go over to the West Indies to purvey the beans. And then at one point he was lost. He never came back from one of his trips, and his widow continued on with the Bakers until Bakers took over her share. But that's a little bit about how the first North American chocolate mill got started, by the aid of an Irishman, believe it or not. And in Ireland, if you've been there, you know that they love milk chocolate. It sort of showcases the grass-fed cows and their milk. So everything's very creamy, but milk chocolate is very high in sugar, I'm sure you know. It's delicious. Everything in moderation, right? But who likes milk chocolate? Yeah, you like it? Me too. So that is 33% cacao. So that is 33% cacao means it's 67% sugar. So 1/3 cacao to 2/3 sugar. And then, say that?
What about the dairy?
Yeah, the dairy's in there. Okay. It strengthens your bones. We'll tell ourselves that, right? And then what about white chocolate? Sir, do you like white chocolate?
In moderation.
All right, so in
Basically,
moderation, right, with Easter coming up, all the white chocolate Easter bunnies. So white chocolate's a great marketing scam because there's no chocolate in white chocolate, right? It's cocoa butter and sugar. The Swiss came up with that idea. They were using the remainder of the excess cocoa butters and they added some sugar to it and created white chocolate. So, also I wanted to mention to you a few sort of new age bean to bar purveyors in Ireland. Most people, like we say, they love their milk chocolate. Butler's is well known in Ireland. That's been around since the 30s. If you go there, you'll see Butler's chocolate. And funny enough, Marion Butler, when she came over from India, she was Indian. So here she is, the first purveyor of chocolate in Ireland, and she's an Indian woman. And then the Sorensens bought her company, and they're not Irish either. And then in Kildare, Lily O'Brien's is a very well-known chocolatier. And there's also some new people doing the bean to bar, which means they're starting and bringing in beans themselves and starting the process from scratch, roasting everything themselves and making darker chocolates, where most people are used to the milk chocolates. And there's a woman in 2012 that started Wilkie's Chocolate in Cork, and she actually brings in the best beans possible, called the Criollo bean, and that's like the most expensive type bean because it has the most cocoa solids in it. So and the most flavorful beans, really. So they're the people on the outskirts starting this new type of chocolate making process in Ireland. And so now I think we'll try our bark. Okay, as long as you don't have any food allergies. Some people are allergic to coconut too. I had someone in a program that was allergic to coconut. So FYI, this has coconut in it. Again, 54% cacao. So let me take some of these now. You're not like coconut. Thank you. All right. Oops, touch a napkin. There you go. Okay, so what do you think of the bark? It's got texture. You like the texture? Some people don't like texture in their chocolate, but I like, you do? Me too. I do, I definitely do. And of course it's a little bit more complex. So now this is getting our palate ready because it's not just plain 54%. It's got some of those textures and foods in it. So it's getting, putting a little bit of richness on our palate. Okay, so health benefits. If you need to be convinced, and we're not talking about white chocolate. That just makes you feel happy. That's a health benefit, right? It makes you feel good. But anything that is 70% and up. So our next chocolate will be in that category. And so for the dark chocolates, chocolate affects your mood. It is very high in magnesium, cacao. And it's high in magnesium, which affects your serotonin levels, and it's sort of a mood elevator. It reduces your LDL, which is your bad cholesterol in your body. It's good for brain cognition. They've done studies as far as staving off Alzheimer's disease and helping with sort of reasoning skills. And it's very good for arterial blood flow and for your heart. So there are a lot of very good benefits to it, as long as you eat something dark. And I think it might have been at one of my programs a few years ago. I always tell this story because I think it's so funny. An older woman was in the audience at a Celtic program, and she had a brogue. And I always ask, you know, who has anything, eats more than a higher percentage other than 85? And I'll ask you guys, does anybody eat 90 on a regular basis? But you like it. So that's something to get used to, 90%. So she raised her hand and she said, Yes, I eat 90% every day. It gives me lots of energy. It gives me lots of get up and go. And she was like really, interacting and asking a lot of questions. And I said, oh, that's so amazing. Do you wash it down with, like your Bewley's tea or your Lion's tea? She said, no, I just have a nice shot of Jameson every day. And it gets me going. It gets me started for the day. So that got a big laugh in the audience, and I thought, that's funny, she looked like the Board of Health, and that was her vitamin of the day, got her started for the day. So that's a little bit about our health benefits of chocolate. All right, so now for the teas. So we have our berries tea, which you were saying, the green box, or the red box you have? You drink the red. So there's the green box, berries is from Cork. But Bewley's, who's had Bewley's tea before? Has anyone had that tea? No. So, do you like it?
I like it all.
Yeah, you like it all. I love Bewley's tea. When my daughter was over there just for a little bit of time, studying in Dublin, studying Guinness, that's what she studied. And so when we went over to visit, I just was so excited because I love the Bewley's tea that I used to buy here. And so I went with an empty piece of luggage that is not a joke, and I bought like $500 worth of tea and like ripped all the boxes open and filled it with tea bags and brought it back because that's how much I love the tea. And Bewley's has an interesting history. They were one of the first to bring tea to Ireland, believe it or not, in the 1840s. So they, along with other tea purveyors, were having issues with the East India Tea Company, who were, extracting a lot of taxes. So they actually brought over like 2,100 chests of tea directly on the slow boat from literally China. And they went to the harbor and collected their tea and sort of circumvented the tax man, so the story goes. And very interestingly, at the time, people really didn't drink a lot of tea in Ireland at that time. So they were the ones to sort of take the gamble and introduce the Irish people to tea. So they were the first, and then comes berries around the 1900s, I believe. Bless you. And then after that, Lion's tea came on board. A lot of people enjoy Lion's tea, but they sort of started as corner shops in Ireland, and that's how they sort of got around the country because they were sort of restaurateurs, so they were widespread because of their restaurants. But whichever one, you like, I mean, they're typical in the same construct of the Indian and the Kenyan tea leaves. That make the background for it. And it said that people in Ireland drink up to 7 pounds of tea, dry tea, 7 pounds per person, which is quite a bit, which is pretty amazing. What's that?
7 pounds per what?
Per person, per year.
Per year.
Yeah,
Okay.
per year. So, pretty amazing. If you've had box tea, has anyone had the traditional potato cake called box tea? It's similar to a potato pancake, and Gallagher's in Dublin is known to have some of the best box tea, but it's basically a very finely ground potato pancake. I think every heritage has some type of potato pancake. And I bring this little grater because that was a point of pride. A lot of the tinkers would go around to the different households and make the graters so that the women in the house could make the box tea, which was, something sort of like a skill, like way back when if you could bake and cook, you could get a man. And there's actually a poem that says, box tea on the griddle, box tea in the pan. If you don't know how to make box tea, you will never get a man. So this is just something that they would hang by their fireside, and it would be a point of pride in the household that they knew how to have that, or they had that skill. Also, if you've had colcannon, which is the potatoes mixed with kale, that is delicious, and cabbage. There's also another poem which I thought was great because it's very buttery with the Irish butter on top and some scallions. It says, do you ever eat colcannon made from lovely Irish cream? with the greens and scallions mingled like a picture in a dream? Did you ever make a hole on top for that melted little flake of the creamy Irish butter that your mother used to make? Doesn't that sound good right now? A bowl of mashed potatoes with lots of butter. Sounds great. So that's a little bit about some of the fare you could have. I actually had boxty for the first time on Thanksgiving when I went to visit my daughter, and that was delicious. It's so delicious paired with a little Guinness, right? That makes it taste even a little bit better. So also, speaking of liquid refreshment, right, we have Guinness. Who's taken the Guinness tour over in Ireland? Anybody?
Me.
So what do you think of that? You have? Didn't they card you? What's happening here? Did you go recently?
They didn't card me.
No, I wasn't.
It was, I don't know, not very recently, but about a dozen years ago.
A dozen years ago. It's a fun tour. Isn't it a beautiful view?
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's pretty
really
neat.
lovely.
Someone just told me they were over there, and they actually, a lot of groups rent out the top floor with the view of
I
Dublin.
think that's true,
That's
because it's
beautiful.
right by the Liffey and.
Yeah. So speaking of that, I thought this was very interesting. I had my Guinness book because I'm very interested in the history of things. And Arthur Guinness, he was the son of the land steward in Dublin for the Archbishop of Cashel. His father worked on the property, and so Arthur lived on the property as well. They were very close with the Archbishop. And then the Archbishop actually became Arthur's godfather. And when the Archbishop passed, he was kind enough to leave £100 to each Arthur and his father. And Arthur was a sharp cookie, and he went over to the defunct St. James factory that is now Guinness, the tour today. And he purchased that factory because it was sitting near the River Liffey for the nice, pure Irish water spring water that it could help brew the beers. And his father used to brew beer for the Archbishop, so that's how he learned about beer making. That was his first wise investment. And then his second wise investment was marrying an heiress in Dublin. She was a very prominent, wealthy young girl in Dublin, and he married her, and they had, get this, 21 children together. Back then, in like the 1750s. Isn't that amazing? But of course, sadly, only 10 survived, and they continued his factory and brewery. And they also helped him decide on the emblem for the beer, and so they used that as the basis from the national symbol of Ireland, the harp. Brian Boru, the King of Ireland, his harp. But they didn't want to insult the national symbol, so they used the strings on the left. The soundboard has the strings on the left on the Guinness harp. And then another very interesting thing I thought was that they employed many coopers to make all the barrels. They were very busy, and by the early 1900s, they actually had 300 coopers working, making these barrels. And that was an art form. You had to have an apprenticeship. And your master cooper, who sort of, you answered to in many aspects of your life, not just work life, you had to run who you were interested in and who you thought of dating, past your master cooper. And you weren't allowed to drink working at the Guinness factory, because I guess they wanted to have you make straight barrels, right? So at one point they had 300 coopers making 1,000 barrels a week, which is unbelievable. And they got paid per piece, per barrel. And then as the time went on and people were using, turning more towards aluminum containers, the coopers were phased out over time. And if you were a master cooper and you had an excellent sense of smell, you would be named, this is a picture of a man smelling a barrel, you would be given the name Master Smeller. Isn't that funny? master smeller would smell the barrels that came back to the brewery to make sure they were clean or fair or foul, sweet or foul. And if they were not, they would have to be cleaned and steamed. But the master smellers never knelt to smell the barrels. The barrels were raised to their nose so they could smell them properly. So that was just sort of interesting trivia about Guinness. And they have said that, of course, the Irish consume the most of Guinness. Then there is the UK, and after them comes Africa. So they actually ship a lot of the hops over to Africa, a good majority of the hops over to Africa, and then they brew it over there because there's so much consumption over there. And then comes us. But I thought that was interesting. And China also consumes quite a bit and is a big consumer of Guinness as well. So, all right, so are you ready for your next chocolate?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to be having our 73% cacao, and so this is considered sort of a semi-sweet at this point. I think that Guittard sort of has nice vanilla and butterscotch notes, so you'll see what you think of that. It's the tempered product again. It should snap and melt on your tongue. And it's got some are colada, some are shamrocks.
Oh, we did, baby.
Could you tell us again the names of what the last chocolate was and what this one is? Like the brand or the what?
This is Guittard,
The what?
and Guittard Belgian
Okay.
chocolate, and the last one is Guittard. That's what I use.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that the best. Here, this is a different one you can look at. See the hands? That's called a colada. You know that? That's a shamrock.
There must be some
So,
for a
now that
multiplier.
you tried the 73, did anyone feel that even though this bark was a lesser amount of cacao solids, did that taste darker to you because of what was in the textured bark? Or does this taste darker? What do you think? It is, it's smooth, yeah, it's nice. Yeah, I really like it. I went to a lot of chocolate shows in New York. When you first get started as a commercial chocolatier, you want to taste different types of chocolates. And when you go to the shows, you could try 10 different manufacturers of, let's say, 50% chocolate. They'll all taste different. And amazingly, you do get sick of the chocolate during that day. And they all are using different beans from different parts of the world, so it does taste different. And this one just speaks to me, I think because I like vanilla, the scent of vanilla, the scent of a little bit of caramel notes, and that's why I like it. Okay, so Jameson, that has been brewed since the 1800s, and of course if you've had it, it's has that nutty sort of spice to it as the Irish whiskey. This is a reserve. It's empty, so don't get any ideas. This is an empty box. And also, way back to 1000 AD, the Scots and the Irish were brewing grain in barrels. And in Gaelic, whiskey means the breath of life. So, and then another interesting trivia that I thought was neat, the Irish coffee, how did that come to be? And the story goes that there was a chef, Mr. Sheridan. He worked at an airport in County Limerick, and a lot of the planes that went from New York to Europe at the time, they would be sort of downed by the heavy winds. They'd have to land at this airport. And one of the planes landed, and there were a lot of American tourists on board, and they were not used to the cold weather. And which I can attest to. I could never get used to that. That's so damp over there in the winter. It's so cold. But when they got off the plane, this man started took the tea glasses, the shape, and he poured the hot water in the glass to heat the glass. That's step one of Irish coffee, to bring the temperature of the glass up to a warm temperature. And then he poured in the coffee and added some brown sugar. That's the traditional way, adding some brown sugar. And then after mixing that in comes the Jameson. And then finally, instead of pouring the cream on top, he was, putting on a show for the tourists. So he actually poured the heavy cream over the back of a spoon, so it actually separated. And so a lot of people feel that, you never obviously mix those together. The beauty is you're drinking the coffee through the whiskey and then capping it with the cream, the natural cream. So that's just how that came to be. And then when it was sort of becoming popular over in Ireland, a travel writer thought it was so great, he took it back over to San Francisco, and that's how it became very popular here. All right, who knows anything about the claddagh? Do you have a claddagh ring? Anybody?
I don't have one, I know about it.
What do you know? Or what do you like to share? Let's put it that way.
Well, it's a wedding ring that comes from a part of Galway, maybe Connemara, that it is still a traditional wedding ring.
Right.
Often still used that way.
Right.
And it was actually the man who wore it. And it's a shape of two hands holding a heart, and on top of the heart there's a crown.
Right.
And the saying is, for the wedding, it's with my heart I give you, wait a minute, with my hands I give you my heart, and with my love I give you my heart, and with my hands I crown it.
Yes, I've heard that one.
And the tradition has become especially when women would wear it, you would wear it facing out if your heart was open,
Right.
and you would wear it facing in towards your own body if your heart was taken.
Yep, that's right, very good. Well, here's just a nice picture of it. And some of the lore says that Queen Elizabeth sort of told the maker of the ring, Richard Joyce. The lore is that Richard Joyce came from Galway in the fishing village where Claddagh is, and he was taken as a slave by Algerian Moors, and he was taught the art of goldsmithing. So that's when he was set free. That's how he came to be the maker of the ring, supposedly, and he was the first to make the ring. And supposedly Queen Elizabeth, at her behest, sort of heavily suggesting to add the crown for loyalty, her little stamp of approval, so to say. Just like, what's your name? I'm sorry.
Jackie.
So Jackie was saying, the way you wear it shows that your heart is either open or you're taken, which I thought was a beautiful little design as well. I wanted to read this poem. I just sometimes find poems that I thought are really speak to especially the art of the claddagh. So this one is called The Old Claddagh Ring. And by the way, on the way out, I have some different books you can look at, and there's a book on the history of the St. Patrick's Day Parade. There are a bunch of different books you can take a look at when you're leaving. The old claddagh ring, sure it was my grandmother's. She wore it for a lifetime, and she gave it to me. All through the years, she wore it so proudly. It was made where the claddagh rolls down to the sea. What tales it could tell of her trials and her hardships, of grand happy days when the whole world would sing. So away with your sorrow, it will bring love tomorrow. Everyone loves it, the old claddagh ring. With the crown and the crest to remind me of honor, and the clasping of the heart that God's blessing would bring, the circle of gold always kept us contented. 'Twas true love entwined in her old claddagh ring. As she knelt at her prayers and thought of her dear ones, her soft, gentle smile would charm a strong king. And on her worn hand, as she told us the story, you could see the bright glint of her old claddagh ring. So I hope you like that. I thought that was a really beautiful poem. Okay, so just want to mention that I'm going to be asking some questions right now. Are you ready for some trivia? Hello? Crickets? That was rhetorical. I'm asking questions. All right, here we go. This is mostly trivia, a few facts, but let's see what you think. Just yell it out if you think you know it. What town in County Dublin lends its name to the description of a brawl? Is it a brouhaha, a ballyhoo, or a Donnybrook?
Well, I know the answer, but I feel like I'm cheating.
No, yell it out.
Donnybrook.
Loud and proud, Jackie. That's right. Okay, very good. A Donnybrook, that's right. In the 5th century, who was the Irish monk who allegedly discovered America before Columbus? Is it St. Thomas, St. Brendan, or St. Bernard?
St. Brendan.
St.
Good job.
Brendan the Navigator. That's right, that's right. What Gaelic word do you think is a transliteration meaning small fragments? Flotsam, sheards, or smithereens? What do you think?
Smithereens.
Smithereens. I love that word. That's a Gaelic word. Yep. Okay, here's a fun fact. FDR asked then Irish Mayor of New York, Jimmy Walker, "Why do you Irish always answer a question with a question?" To which Mayor Walker replied, "Do we now?" I like that. Take that, FDR. This is a fact that the oldest stone carvings in some caves in Ireland depict Irish people playing harps, which is pretty neat. How many men of Irish descent signed the Declaration of Independence? 2, 9, or 12? What do you think?
9.
That's correct. Very good back there in the strong seats. Very good. When do you think was the first St. Patrick's Day celebration held in Boston? 1737 or 1785? What do you think?
1785.
No, try again. What's the other answer? 1737. Good try though. All right. The first St. Patrick's Day celebration on Fifth Avenue in New York was 1875. So that was a really early one in Boston. Bishop Fulton Sheen said the difference between Blarney and bologna is that bologna is too thick and it cannot be true, while Blarney is so thin. We like it that way. I like that one. And Dublin was founded in 988 by the Vikings, and its Gaelic name, Dublin. Does it mean black pool, marshland, or sea tide? What do you think?
Black.
Sea-tide.
Blackpool.
That's right, Jackie.
Well, I'm-
Everybody knows Jackie. Thank
Someone
you,
else
Jackie.
said it that. Someone else
That's
said
right.
that. I didn't say that
Blackpool.
first. I don't want all the credit.
All right, so let me see what else I want to tell you. Okay, let me tell you this and then we'll try our dark chocolate. If you've been to Trinity College in Dublin, and even if you haven't, you probably know about the Book of Kells, written by the monks, which has a beautiful Celtic artistry. They turn a few pages each day, different pages. But I brought some artwork you could check out later. This is a little bit about the Celtic crosses and the different lore behind what the circles are in the crosses. Some believe that the circle represents the strength and St. Patrick and how he tried to unite the Druids and the Catholics. Some people believe it's the Masons that actually constructed the different stone crosses to add strength to the arms of the sculpture. Some of the Roman people believe that it was their Roman god, the Celtic sun god, and on it goes. Everybody wants to claim a little bit of the lore. But basically, anything in the Celtic religion sort of, and other religions too, represents the never-ending sphere of life that we're all connected. And that is prevalent throughout even the knots that are the Celtic knots down here, the knots in the spirals. A lot of the monks sort of wanted to leave their sort of message, their religious message open to interpretation, sort of the never-ending flow of life. And if you've ever tried to draw an Irish knot, that is a tricky situation. I quit. Somebody gave me a book on drawing Celtic knots. I'm like, oh, it's so tricky. So it's you really can admire the artistry behind that. And then this one, the zoomorphic imagery, this is very interesting. This is sort of based in the Viking tradition, where the Vikings brought in these supernatural beasts of strength. And So when the monks started drawing the beasts and incorporating them into some of the pages, they were it was sort of suggested to sort of tone down the supernatural type beast images and sort of make them look more like animals. And even in some of the pages, the disciples, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're actually depicted as some beasts like lions and tigers. So I thought that was a beautiful image of the horse. And then lastly, the illumination of the letters, which you've seen in many different types of illustration with the gold leaf. And when you come up, the capital letters were made on vellum, and they have like really beautiful disciples and monks like drawn right into the design. So you can look at this and see what you think. I just love that. That was my favorite thing. Unfortunately, when I went, my girls were little and they were not very tolerant in the museum. So I had to go back and enjoy it on my own after that. All right, we're going to try our dark chocolate and our cheddar. Okay, we'll see what you think of that. So,
Can you eat the whole thing?
so what do you think?
I like it.
You like the mixture? I like it too.
I like it.
Some people are just like, a little funky, but I think it's very interesting that the sugar, the sweetness of the cheddar pairs nicely with the darker chocolate. I've tried all of them because I do a lot of cheese programs, so trying and pairing the dark with different cheeses is very interesting.
Have some more chocolate.
Okay, I wanted to mention this before I forget. Since I'm in Cheshire, Connecticut, I don't know if anyone has been to the Ireland's Great Hunger Museum. Have you heard of it?
No.
Okay, so I like to spread the word because I'm down the road from this museum. It is the brainchild of John Leahy, who is the president of Quinnipiac University in Hamden. And they bought a property on the main road near their school, and they converted it to this gorgeous museum, which is free, by the way. It's 2 hours from here, and it is a worthwhile trip. They have sculpture, and they have beautiful exhibits, and it really speaks to the famine. So it's not, it's a very moving experience, let's say that. It's a very moving experience. And I brought brochures for you that are over on this table. So on your way out, you may grab one if you ever want to take a ride. And they're bringing in a new exhibit in April as well. So they have a lot of beautiful displays there. So just wanted to mention that. They highlight the journeys of people that came over on the ships in steerage, and it makes you appreciate, when people come over here, what they had to go through. And speaking of that, Ellis Island, and before that, Castle Garden. Castle Garden was the stop before Ellis Island opened. And Annie Moore was the first young girl to come through Ellis Island. She was only 14, and she came over with her 2 brothers. So they were over on that boat in steerage for 12 days. Can you imagine being a 14-year-old in charge of your little brothers without your mother? They actually came over to be with their mother. So that really, makes you really appreciate what people have gone through. And then, have you ever wondered, I wonder if there's an Irish pirate. Have you ever thought about that? I know you have. So Grace O'Malley, there have been a lot of great songs written about her. She was a very interesting woman. This was back in the 1500s, and she was known as the Pirate Queen. She came from a long line of a seafaring clan over in, where was it? County Mayo. And very interestingly, what's that?
She guessed that.
Oh, really?
No, it's a Mayo name.
Oh,
O'Malley.
well, there you go. Also, it's so funny, speaking about the name, so her last name O'Malley. So someone in my program was sitting next to Cardinal O'Malley when they were at some Boston event, and the first thing he said when he got up to speak was, well, as you know, I'm from a long line of pirates. So I thought that was great. But Grace O'Malley, this is lore, but it actually, I actually read that after she gave birth to her son, one of her sons, she went out the next day and fought a battle against the Turks. That's a tough Irish woman, right? I don't know if that's true. But she also, when her sons were older and they were captured by Queen Elizabeth, she actually went over to meet the Queen to plead for clemency for her 2 sons. And this is very interesting. Here she comes from this small little village, and she knew Latin, but she didn't know how to speak English, Gaelic and Latin, and Queen Elizabeth did not know Irish, Gaelic, so they actually conversed through speaking Latin to one another. Isn't that amazing? And she convinced the Queen to provide clemency for her 2 sons, which is pretty neat. So that's just a little bit about that. I think someone had mentioned to me who was from that area, they said her Gaelic name is something like Grana Whale, which means the bald one, because when she was trying to join her father's fleet, she actually shaved her head to sort of like blend like one of the boys when she was younger. So it's so interesting, the history of people. It's really something. All right, so, and the last thing I want to mention to you is some of the literature and the famous people who have contributed from Ireland. The 4 writers, of course, you've heard of them. Yeats, he won the Nobel Prize in 1923. George Bernard Shaw, who was famous for his many plays, but Pygmalion, which was turned into My Fair Lady. He wrote into his 90s, and he wrote over 50 plays. And these are 2 quotes that I've seen all the time, and I never knew that these were his quotes, so maybe you'll recognize these. One is, life isn't about finding yourself, life is about creating yourself. That was George Bernard Shaw. And the other one, this is my favorite. We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. And that was him as well. Samuel Beckett and Seamus Heaney also won the Nobel Prize. And then Ireland's first contributor, well-known contributor to literature, was Jonathan Swift, Gulliver's Travels. He wrote that in the 1720s. Imagine that, way back when. And Bram Stoker, he wrote Dracula. And then Oscar Wilde, the flamboyant Oscar Wilde, he wrote The Importance of Being Earnest and Dorian Gray. And then James Joyce for the Dubliners, which I remember reading in high school thinking, am I ever going to get through that book? So those are just some of the contributors. Okay, so I also wanted to mention that we are having a sing-along. Did you know? Did you know you were singing today? Surprise! Yes, sir.
To add to famous writers, Ireland has produced one of the world's great physicists, Sir William Rowan Hamilton.
Oh, that is not my area. Thank you so much.
Potentially, he's at least competitive with any other mad science prodigy.
Really?
And also language. He knew about 6 languages by the time he was 6 years old.
By the time he was 6?
Yes. And before he went into
That
medicine.
makes you believe in reincarnation, right? 6
and,
languages. Wow.
So he's famous, among many other things, for a formulation of classical mechanics called the Hamiltonian, which is still the most modern way of dealing with it, and is also the foundation for quantum mechanics.
So what was his first name?
Yeah, can you repeat his name again?
Sir William Rowan Hamilton.
Sir William, oh, and you said Hamiltonian?
Yes.
Sir William Rowan Hamilton. Thanks for sharing. That's really neat. All right, before we sing, do you have any questions for me about anything?
Okay.
Is it time? Yes, it's time to sing. All right. I'm glad you asked. Okay. Oh, I'll read this last thing and then we'll get started. Okay, you should have a song sheet on your chair. This is a poem called My Dublin Days. I hold the fondest memories of my golden Dublin days. Cobbled streets beneath my feet led to friends along the way. On a pub stool or two over Irish stew came 100,000 welcomes, so to say. Dublin mornings of brown bread and sweet Irish butter, steaming hot pots of Barry's black tea. Dublin fare paired with Guinness makes the Blarney flow fairly easily. A stroll over Dublin Bridge, draped with twinkling lights, the river Liffey never looked so pretty. She was a grand sight to behold each night. On Grafton, the statue of Dublin's famous lass, sweet Molly Malone, give a nod as you pass. If you listen, you may hear her, you may need to get near her, singing cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. And as you leave this place, an emerald isle of such grace, its warm Gaelic ways are forever treasures of all my sweet Dublin days. Excuse me. Okay, are you ready?
There's a question here.
Yes?
What are cockles? I know what mussels are. but
I
don't know
guess
what-
it's a shellfish. Good question, though.
Shellfish?
It's got to be some type of a fish, since she was a fishmonger.
It's a shellfish.
But I have to look it up. It's a shellfish, she
It's
said.
a shellfish.
Jackie said, and Jackie knows.
What is it?
It's a
Cockle,
shellfish.
It's kind of like a scallop, but it's not as flat.
Oh, a
It's
scallop.
more like, if a scallop is like this, the cockle's like that.
Oh, right. That sounds good.
I
Does
mean,
sound,
I've never
if it's
eaten
good as
them.
a scallop, sure.
I've never eaten them, but I've seen plenty of the shells.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, grab your song sheets, and FYI, there's one more chorus of Alive, Alive, Oh at the end, okay? And you have to carry me. I had a little laryngitis a couple weeks ago, it keeps popping up, so. Here we go. In Dublin's fair city, where the girls are so pretty, I first set my eyes on sweet Molly Malone. As she wheeled her little barrow through the streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. She was a fishmonger, but sure 'twas no wonder, for so were her father and mother before, and they each wheeled their barrow through the streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. She died of a fever, and no one could save her, and that was the end of sweet Molly Malone. Where those fields are narrow, through the streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. Very good. Thank you for singing. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I have more hot tea here, especially if you came in late. Come on up and have some hot tea. There are books here. You can bring put your song sheets back in this tray and come and look at some of the books and stuff. Thanks for coming.